Okay, so this is the Daf for May 8th, 2025. We're in Shavuot Daf 7. So at the end of 6, it says, the Gemara asks, but say that this statement applies only to a fixed sin offering, but one can bring a sliding scale offering for the unwitting violation of a transgression whose intentional violation is not punishable by karet, just as in the case of violation for hearing the voice, Leviticus 5:1, which is where a litigant asks a witness to testify about an event, and he takes a false oath that he did not witness the event, and for taking a false oath with the utterance of lips, Leviticus 5:4. Both of these cases in intentional violation, not punishable by karet, and nevertheless one is liable to bring a sliding scale offering for an unwitting violation. The Gemara answers, it cannot be referring to one who partakes of teruma while ritually impure, as the verse concerning a sliding scale offering states, or if he, quote, or if he will touch impurity of a man in any manner of his impurity through which he can become impure, Leviticus 5:3. The verse states, quote, through which, to exclude an impure person who partakes of teruma from liability to bring a sliding scale offering. The Gemara asks, but say the verse states, through which, to exclude one who defiles the temple and teaches that due to the severity of the transgression, it is not sufficient for him to achieve atonement with a sliding scale offering. Rather, he will not achieve atonement until he brings a fixed sin offering. Accordingly, no proof can be drawn from here. Rava read the following verse about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, one who draws water from deep wells, Proverbs 20, verse 5. This verse describes Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi because by delving deeply into the Bible or into the Hebrew Scriptures, he found a source that a sliding scale offering atones for the unwitting defiling of sacrificial foods for partaking of them while ritually impure. So it is taught, this is as it is taught in a Braita concerning the verse, quote, or if a person will have touched any impure object, or the carcass of an impure animal, or the carcass of an impure domesticated animal, Leviticus 5:2. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, since a domesticated animal is also referred to as chaya, it would be sufficient if I would read only the verse's clause about a chaya. Why then is an explicit clause about behemah stated? It is in order to derive a verbal analogy. It is stated in the verse here, an impure domesticated animal, and it is stated in the verse below with regard to one who intentionally defiles an offering by partaking of it while he is impure. An impure domesticated animal, Leviticus 7:21. Just as below the references to the defiling of sacrificial foods, so to here the references to the defiling of sacrificial foods. The Gemara continues, we found a source for the halacha, that sliding scale offering atones for the defiling of sacrificial foods. From where do we derive that it also atones for the defiling of the temple by entering it while ritually impure? The verse states, with regard to a woman after childbirth who is impure due to having given birth, quote, she may not touch any sacred item and she may not enter the temple, Leviticus 12, verse 4. The verse juxtaposes the temple to sacred items to teach that the halachot that apply to one after the other. Accordingly, the sliding scale offering atones for both. The Gemara asked, if so, that the liability to bring a sliding scale offering is derived from this verse, then one should also be liable to bring the offering if he partakes of teruma while impure, as the master said that the general term sacred item in the verse, quote, she may not touch any sacred item, serves to include teruma in the prohibition. Accordingly, it should be also be included in the obligation to bring in a sliding scale offering. The Gemara explains, the merciful one excludes something with the term through which, Leviticus 5:3. Should we say that the term through which serves to exclude the defiling of the temple? No, it is reasonable that we should not exclude the defiling of the temple, as its intentional violation is punishable by karet. Just like one who defies sacrificial foods by partaking of them while he is impure, rather the term must serve to exclude one who partakes of teruma while impure. The Gemara offers a counter-argument. On the contrary, we should not exclude one who partakes of teruma while impure, as it is a violation done through eating, similar to one who eats sacrificial food while impure. Therefore, there is still no proof that one is liable to bring a sliding scale offering for defiling the temple. Rather, Rava said it can be derived from the following. Why does the Torah mention 3 times the punishment of karet with regard to the one who partakes of peace offerings while he is impure? The 3 times are Leviticus 22, verse 3, 7:20, and 7:21. One time is to apply the punishment to the general case, of a ritually impure person who partakes of any type of offering, and one time is to apply it to the specific instance of a peace offering, and one time is to apply it to another case of defiling something sacred that is written in the Torah without specifying what it is referring to. And I do not know from that passage what that case is. Rava continues, the only passage that describes the defiling of something sacred without specifying the situation is the passage in the Torah that discusses a sliding scale offering brought for defiling of sacred sacrificial foods. Therefore, you must say the third mention of karet is referring to the defiling of sacrificial foods, but it is not needed to teach the matter of defiling sacrificial foods, as that has been derived through the verbal analogy of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi applied to the matter of defiling the temple. Accordingly, one who intentionally defiles the temple by entering it while impure is liable to receive karet, and it is reasonable that he should be liable to bring a sliding scale offering for doing so unwittingly. The Gemara asks, but that third mention is necessary in order to expound it in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Abahu. As Rabbi Abahu says, why does the Torah mention 3 times the punishment of karet with regard to one who partakes of peace offerings while he is ritually impure? One time is to apply the punishment to the general case of an impure person who partakes of any type of offering, and one time is to apply it to the specific instance of a peace offering, and one time is to apply it to an impure person who eats items that are not generally eaten, such as frankincense. The Gemara adds, and according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that for items that are not generally eaten, one is not liable to be punished with karet for partaking of them while he is ritually impure. The third mention is necessary in order to include the case of an impure person who eats an internal sin offering, as it could enter your mind to say that since Rabbi Shimon says for any type of offering that is not sacrificed on and its blood applied to the external altar in the manner that peace offerings let me say this over. Rabbi Shimon says, for any type of offering that is not sacrificed on and its blood applied to the external altar in the manner that the peace offerings are, one cannot be liable to be punished with karet for eating it if it is pigul. That is, for eating such an offering if it was sacrificed with the intent to consume it after its appointed time. So one might have thought that similarly, for such an offering, one is also not liable to be punished with karet for intentionally partaking of it while ritually impure. And the third mention teaches us that one is indeed liable. Therefore, there is still no proof that one is liable to bring a sliding scale offering for unwittingly entering the temple while impure. Rather, the sages of Nahardea said in the name of Rava that it can be derived from the following. Why does the Torah mention 3 times the ritually impure status with regard to one who partakes of peace offerings while he is pure? That is, each of the 3 times that the Torah mentions the punishment of karet, it also mentions the fact that the person was impure at the time. One time is for the general case of an impure person who partakes of any type of offering, and one time is for the specific instance of one who partakes of a peace offering, and one time is to apply it to another case of defiling something sacred that is written in the Torah without specifying what it is referring to, and I do not know from that passage what the case is. Now, the only passage that describes the defiling of something sacred without specifying the situation is the passage in the Torah that discusses a sliding scale offering that is brought for defiling of sacrificial foods. Therefore, you must say that the third mention of karet is referring to the defiling of sacrificial foods. But if it is not needed to teach the matter of defiling sacrificial foods, as that has been derived through the verbal analogy of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, apply it to the matter of defiling the temple. The Gemara asks, but that third mention is also necessary because since it is necessary for the Torah to write the karet punishment 3 times in order to expound it in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Abahu, it also has to write that the person was ritually impure, as it is not sufficient to mention the punishment without mentioning for what the punishment is given. Accordingly, there is still no proof that one is liable to bring a sliding scale offering for unwittingly defiling the temple. So rather, Rava said it is derived from a verbal analogy between the terms his impurity and his impurity as follows. It is written here with regard to a sliding scale offering, or if he will touch the impurity of a man in any manner of his impurity through which he can become impure. Leviticus 5, verse 3. And it is written here with regard to the red heifer. Quote, whoever touches the corpse of a man who died and is not sprinkled, he will have contaminated the tabernacle of God. So he will be impure. His impurity is still upon him. Numbers 19, verse 13. This verbal analogy teaches that just as there the verse is referring to the defiling of the temple, so too here the sliding scale offering is brought to atone for the defiling of the temple. So the Gemara asks, but if so, why do I need the term through which Leviticus 5, verse 3? The Gemara earlier derived from this term that one who is impure and unwittingly eats teruma is not liable to bring a sliding scale offering. The Gemara has now derived that the sliding scale offering atones specifically for the unwitting defiling of the temple. If so, it is obvious that one is not liable for unwittingly eating teruma, and the phrase is superfluous. The Gemara answers the term through which serves to include one who was rendered impure by eating the unslaughtered carcass of a kosher bird. Unlike the other impure items which render impurity any person who touches them, the carcass of a kosher bird renders a person impure only if he eats it. Therefore, one might have thought he would not be liable for entering the temple if he was rendered impure by having eaten the carcass of a kosher bird. The extra term is therefore necessary to teach that one is liable. The Gemara challenges, but didn't you say above that the term through which is a restriction? How can you now use it to include additional cases? The Gemara explains it is precisely because it is a restriction that it includes additional cases. As it is written at the beginning of the verse, quote, or if he will touch any impurity of a man, Leviticus 5, verse 3, which indicates the one who is impure with a form of impurity that can impart impurity through touching. Yes, he is liable for defiling the temple by entering it in his impure state. But if one is impure with a form of impurity that cannot impart impurity through touching, then one would not be liable. Therefore, the verse opens with a restriction, and when the verse continues, and it is written through which is also a restriction, this restriction serves only to amplify the halacha, applying it to additional cases. So the Mishnah continues, for cases in which one had awareness at the beginning, but then digressed through during a lapse of awareness and still had no awareness at the end, the goat whose blood presentation is performed inside the sanctuary on Yom Kippur and the Yom Kippur itself, suspend any punishment that he deserves until he becomes aware of his transgression, at which point he must bring a sliding scale offering. The sages taught in a Braita, the verse states with regard to the internal goat offering, and he shall effect atonement upon the sanctuary of the impurities of the children of Israel, and from their acts of rebellion for all their sins. So with regard to this matter, that is the atonement effected by the sacrifice of the goat, I can state that this verse serves to amplify the atonement by teaching that the goat offering atones for the following three sins, which the Torah is referring to as impurities: the impurity of the sin of idol worship, and the impurity of engaging in forbidden relations, in the impurity of perpetrating bloodshed. The Braita demonstrates that each of these sins is referred to as impurity. With regard to idol worship, the verse says, for he had given his offspring to Moloch in order to render impure the sanctuary, Leviticus 20, verse 3. With regard to forbidden relations, the verse states, you shall safeguard my charge not to do any of the abominable traditions that were done before you, and not to render yourself impure through them. With regard to bloodshed, the verse states, quote, the Lord will not atone for the blood that was spilled on it except through the blood of the one who spilled it. You should not render the land impure, Numbers 35, verse 34. One might have thought that the goat offering would atone for these three types of impurities. To counter this, the verse states, from the impurities of the children of Israel. The restrictive term from indicates that it atones for some impurities, but not for all impurities. The Braita derives the type of impurity from which the goat offering atones. Does atone. What do we find is the impurity that the verse differentiates from all the other impurities? You must say that the verse is referring to the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. It is specifically for this transgression that the Torah provides one of the means of atonement, achieving atonement, that is by bringing a sliding scale offering. So too here, since the verse limits the atonement of the goat offering to transgressions involving impurity, it is logical that it can also atone for only for the defiling of the temple or its sacrificial foods. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Shimon says it is not necessary to derive which transgressions the goat offering atones for by comparing the verse written concerning it to a different verse. Rather, from its own place, from the verse about the atonement effected by the goat itself, it can be determined, as it states, and he shall effect atonement upon the sanctuary, so Hakadosh, from the impurities of all the children of Israel, which shall be interpreted as saying that it atones for defiling of anything sacred, so Kodesh, the temple or its sacrificial foods. So the Braita continues, one might have thought that this goat offering would atone for all the cases of defiling of the temple, even where there was awareness at the beginning and at the end. So to counter this, the verse states, and from the acts of rebellion for all their sins, Leviticus 16:16, which indicates that the goat offering atones only for sins that are similar to the act of rebellion, just as it atones for the acts of rebellion that are not subject to atonement through an offering. A sin offering brought by an individual or brought only for the unwitting sins. So too it atones only for the sins that are not subject to atonement through an offering. As long as one does not become aware of his sin, it cannot be atoned for through the sliding scale offering. Accordingly, the goat will atone for it. Okay, so the Baraita continues, and from where is it derived for a case in which one had awareness at the beginning but did not have awareness at the end, that this goat suspends the punishment that he deserves until he becomes aware of his transgression? The verse states, quote, for all their sins, from which it is indicated that the goat offering atones only for those who are potentially liable to bring a sin offering. The sliding scale offering should be should they become aware of their sins. So the Gemara clarifies some of the details of the Braita. The Master said, with regard to this matter, I can state that this verse serves to amplify the atonement by teaching that the goat offering atones for the following three sins, which the Torah is referring to as impurities. So the impurity of the son and of the the impurity of the sin of idol worship, and the impurity of engaging in forbidden relations, and the impurity of perpetuating bloodshed. So the Gemara asks, concerning this sin of idol worship, for which one might have thought the goat would atone, what are the circumstances? If you say the reference is to a case where he transgressed intentionally, then one can counter that he is subject to the death penalty, and no offering will atone for his sin. And if you say the reference is to a case where he transgressed unwittingly, then one can counter that he is liable to bring his own sin offering for transgression, and the goat will not atone for him. The Gemara answers, the goat offering atones in a case where he transgressed intentionally, but witnesses did not forsake him about his transgression, therefore he is not liable to receive the death penalty. It also atones in a case where he transgressed unwittingly, but by the time Yom Kippur arrived, he had not become aware of his transgression, and therefore he was not liable to bring an offering. And that is the end of Daf 7.